Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Diabetes Empowerment live stream. At Byram, we know that life takes care, and these live streams are one way that we're fulfilling our purpose by having this conversation today. I am Kayla Bowen, digital marketing specialist for Byram Healthcare, and I'm one of the people behind our social media. So, yeah, it's a lot of that posting is me. And then I am joined by Alicia Downs, Director of Patient Care and Education at Integrated Diabetes Services. And before I pass it over to them to introduce themselves, I just have to give a little disclaimer. Nothing stated today is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, but is instead for information purposes only. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about a medical condition or treatment before undertaking a new regimen, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking advice because of something we say here today. So this month's theme on Byram Diabetes Care social media has been diabetes empowerment. So focusing on the positive aspects and how to feel empowered living with diabetes. So an amazing person to talk to about that is Alicia Downs. So if you would introduce yourself, please, that would be amazing.
So I'm Alicia. I am the fun letters that come with my name are RN, MSN, CDCES, so that's a Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist, and BCADM, Board Certified in Advanced Diabetes Care Management. But far more important are PWD, person with diabetes. My personal type of diabetes is LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes of the adult. So I was adult diagnosed in my mid-20s. Diabetes, one of a string of fun autoimmune diagnoses that came along in my life. So diabetes empowerment, obviously very near and dear to my heart, a very big piece of my life and how I live my life and always have. And very central to how I guide my patients and my community to live life healthy, fully with diabetes, type 1, type 2, or any of the 31 flavors of diabetes. We're like Baskin Robbins. We're not just one and two. We're like 31 flavors out here of
Right.
diabetes. Empowerment is central to all of life, including our diabetes management.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Alicia. It's always a pleasure. I've been able to meet Alicia in person when I come down to the Integrated Diabetes Services office in Philadelphia, and it's just always a pleasure to work with you. So let's jump into it. Could you maybe explain a bit about what diabetes empowerment means to you, or just in general, and why you believe that it's crucial for individuals living with diabetes?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at empowerment, we're really looking at we've got two options on how to live, right? Live with any challenge in life. We can live in a sense of being a victim of something that happens to us, because diabetes is something that we can't always change. Some things about it we can have an impact on, but there are a lot of things we can. I mean, in terms of type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disease. I just got dealt a raw deal in the genetic and environmental deal, the hand deal of life, the card game of life. I came up on the short end. But even, in a lot of ways in type 2 diabetes, there are genetic predispositions and physiologic pieces that we only have so much control over. But at that point, we are at a very important crossroads of we can live in a state of victimhood, and victimization, where things are being done to us and we are under threat and under siege and living in fear, and guilt and shame and blame. And it all becomes very negative and very costly to our mental health, to our well-being, to our self-identity. Or we can choose a path of empowerment. When we choose a path of empowerment, it's self-determination, it's growth, it's taking control of what we can control, identifying what we can't control, and releasing that, only holding ourselves accountable for that for which we can have impact and have direct power. And it gives us a very self-actualized view of ourselves and the world around us. It's much healthier. And so instead of being a drain, it's now a source. It's now, instead of my diabetes being something that every day is drawing away from, every decision, drawing away from my life, away from my wellness, away from my internal energy source, it's an addition. I made a decision about my diabetes. I made a choice. I took a step. I took a risk. I made something better. I fixed a problem. I made a mistake, recognized it, took accountability for it, and that makes me a better, stronger person than I was before. So they become just positives and additives and uplifts and strengthening opportunities. And that's empowerment in diabetes and in everything in life. We are only given so many choices and so many options. A large percentage of what happens in our world is not up to us.
Right.
And whenever we're given those moments, that is always a crossroads where we are given the opportunity to say, am I a victim of this? Or is this an opportunity for my empowerment? And the way I've always lived life was in an empowerment mindset. I happened to have been born cross-eyed, club-footed, pigeon-toed.
Wait, you were born with clubfoot?
I was.
So
I was
was
born.
I.
What?
Yes.
What's up, Cass kid?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And I had a number of respiratory problems. I spent more of the first 3 years of my life in and out of hospitals than I was at home. And my mom at that point made a choice of empowerment for me. And it was very much out of necessity because she wasn't super resourced. She wasn't supported. She didn't have strong family ties behind her. And she said, I'm not going to raise a sick kid. And it wasn't that she was going to leave me on a doorstep. It was that she just wasn't going to raise me as a sick kid. She's going to just raise a healthy kid and just kind of figure it out and let me find my own boundaries and limitations. She was just going to raise a healthy kid the best way she knew how. And so from the start, she kind of said, I'm not going to choose the victim mindset for this kid. Right. She's not going to be raised to say, you can't do that because that was never in my language. And, so later on in life, I was like, hey mom, my ballet teacher said that I'm never going to be a professional dancer. And she was like, well, yeah, honey, because when you were a baby, your feet were da-da. And I was like, you couldn't have told me that before I put in 12 years of dance class? She said, well, no, because I wasn't going to raise you with a victim mindset. Right. If you weren't going to be a professional dancer, it was going to be because you found your limit, not because you were a victim of something that had nothing to do with you. And so that really kind of set the stage that then as, other things in life came along that really had nothing to do with me, I went, well, all right, I'm going to take what strength. I'm not going to be a sick kid. Yeah. So, so kind of grasped onto that, and it's held pretty good so far.
Yeah. I mean, just you mentioning clubfoot, it made me think about like, and just the way that you've described your experience with your parents, like, not wanting you to feel limited by that. I definitely had a similar experience. Like, they never made me feel like there was something that I couldn't do. Even though like when I was first going through the casting and then eventually I got surgery, I mean, the doctors were telling my parents that I would never walk at all,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah, that's I never learned. I army crawled
oh,
just like
wow.
on my elbows,
Yeah.
and then I had like the braces,
Yeah.
and my mom still tells the story that I never learned to crawl. Like I army crawled, and they
Yeah.
took my braces off, and I just stood up one day and walked across the room. Like
Wow.
there was no in between. It was just up and gone.
Yeah.
And she was like, so that's the thing she does now.
That's beautiful. I
And that's,
love
we
that.
all have those things. You know, some of us come from socioeconomic statuses that put us a step behind our peers. Some of us come with emotional baggage that we have to overcome. Some of us come from war torn nations that, you know, some of us have educational difficulties and learning disabilities, and everyone has a thing that is
Right.
going to be a barrier. And we all have a choice when we stand looking at that barrier. We can say, this is where I stop because there's a barrier. Oh, woe is me
Mm-hmm.
because of my barrier. And we can just be identified by that barrier. Or we can say, I'm going to stand taller because I'm going to look at the world from on top of this barrier.
Right. Right. I love that visualization. That's great. So, could we talk about like common misconceptions about diabetes and how empowerment can change those perspectives?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest ones is kind of like you were talking, when doctors come and start telling us all the things that we're not going to be able to do. I have a friend who's now about 94 years old. He was diagnosed with diabetes when he was 14. No, younger than 14. Gosh, he would have been about 10. He's now one of the Joslin medalists. Joslin Diabetes Center in Boston has the medalist program. If anyone here has had type 1 diabetes for more than 20 years, reach out. You get a literal medal for every decade that you have lived with type 1. So it feels just pretty darn cool. I'm getting
Yeah.
ready to get my first 20-year medal. I can't wait.
That's
Because
so
darn
nice.
it, we deserve a medal living with this thing.
Absolutely.
We don't get any other prizes with all the haranguing and all the finances we have to put out.
Right.
But his parents were told he'll never get married, he'll never have kids, he'll probably not like graduate from college. He's got a PhD, he's got a wife, he's got kids, grandkids, great grandkids. He's 94. He's seen technologies, he's seen, you know, men put on the moon and the internet and insulin pumps and
Right.
CGI. So you know, doctors will want to say that you're not going to play sports, you're not going to have healthy babies, you know, it's all bunk. The only thing that we currently cannot do is be a US fighter pilot and therefore an astronaut.
Okay.
We have our first commercial passenger jet pilot in the United States. That was the other thing we couldn't do. So there are no holds barred with diabetes. There's a perception that there's this whole list of things that you can't do. There's this whole list of things that you can't eat. People ask, well, oh, you have diabetes? What can you eat? I said, generally anything I can fit in my mouth. Like, what should I eat? Well, that's a very different question.
Mhm.
And then, are we talking about diabetes? Are we talking about weight management? Are we talking about good and bad cholesterol? Because I'm a human being just like everybody else, and there
Right.
are things, you know. Strictly speaking, no one should drink Mountain Dew. It's neon green and largely made of plastic. You know,
Right.
so the human diet and what the human body should have in it is a different question. You know, there's this idea of there's a good diabetes and a bad diabetes. Everybody's, oh, do you have the bad kind? I'm like,
Mm.
What's the bad kind? I mean, I think I have the good kind because it gave me a pretty awesome job and I get to talk to cool people all the time. I get to be like a bionic person with this awesome tech strapped to my body all over the place. And
Yeah.
I mean, before diabetes came along, I was just like an actor doing
You were
stuff and
just
I
a
probably wasn't going to go
normie.
anywhere and nobody was going to know my name about anything. And
Right.
so I happen to think I have the good kind. But people mean, do I have to take shots? Because like
Mm.
that's apparently like the worst thing ever. And I'm like, no,
Mhm.
shots are the easy part. Dealing with the insurance company, that's the
Mhm.
nightmare. That's
Yeah.
that's what makes diabetes horrific is
Right.
the insurance company.
Right.
So there's a lot of that. If I had a dime for everybody who wanted to tell me about their grandma's cat or a million opinions about what I should be eating or what I should be doing. Um, and so there's a lot of that. And so it's really just being able to keep a great sense of humor and being able to be empowered to either A, recognize the people who don't care about me and I don't care about them. And so they can just go on their merry way and I don't have to react to everything.
Right.
Some people just tell me that if I eat enough cinnamon and okra that I can make it go away.
Right.
And they can also go away. I don't
Yeah.
need to react to that. I can just imagine
Right.
that. I can just let them keep going and they don't
Yeah.
impact my life. But the people who do matter to me and I actually matter to them, I can be empowered and I can educate them
Right.
and let them know about how my life really looks. And I can let them know that it's okay to be scared when my blood sugar gets low and it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to wonder if I'm okay. And it's also okay to get real mad and throw a glucometer every now and again because
Mhm.
no, it's not fair.
Yeah.
And to just be a real person about it.
Right.
And to connect with others with diabetes. It is a community. I always say it's kind of like I discovered Smurfs were real. Like there's this whole world of like language and culture and people and
Right.
technology that I had no idea existed. And then the next day I was one of them.
Right.
And I was like, whoa. So, get neck deep in it. If you're a
Yeah.
people person, get into the people. If you're not a people person, read up on it, but just be aware that people are out there.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Um, and I definitely want to touch on the community aspect of it in a little bit, but I am curious to hear more about your personal journey with diabetes. And I know that you've talked about it a bit so far, but maybe expanding more on how when you learned you had diabetes, and then how empowerment played a role in your life from that point.
Yeah, so it was super not fun. I was newly married, had been married for about 6 months. About 6 weeks into that marriage, my husband lost his job. At
Mm.
about the same time, the real estate bubble popped in
Mhm.
2008. So we were on one income. And I had actually gone to the doctors to get that, like, are we ready to start a family physical? And the answer was, oh, no, not even close. And I'd actually been misdiagnosed as type 2 diabetic in college.
Ah.
In college, I was just extremely, extremely tired, just really fatigued. And of course, I thought, well, I'm burning the candle at both ends, probably three ends. I need to sleep more and eat better.
Right.
Finally broke down and went to the doctor, and I have always been rather zoftig. And so, of course, being built like this and going to the doctor, my A1C was elevated. It was probably about an 8. And the doctor said, well, you have type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
Don't eat carbs, take some meds, and it'll go away. Well, I went keto before keto was cool. I was eating less than 20 grams of carbohydrate a day.
Mhm.
Took the medications and they made me quite sick. which should have been an indication that there was something wrong.
Right.
They gave me really severe stomach pain, which in hindsight was pancreatitis because my pancreas was screaming because
Yeah.
it could not do what I was asking it to do.
Right.
And I dropped a lot of weight very fast, which also should have probably clued somebody in. But unfortunately, I didn't have a diabetes educated clinician. She was just a standard PCP that didn't really know what she was doing. And my A1C came down because if you don't eat sugar, that does tend to happen. Like if you eat no carbs at all, it's hard to have glucose in your body. And adult onset diabetes can take a very, very long time to fully develop. So my A1C did come down and I dropped a lot of weight. So she said, congratulations, you've cured yourself of type 2 diabetes. So spoiler alert, there's no such thing as a cure for type 2 diabetes. What happens is the symptom, AKA the high blood sugar, goes away. But the disease, which is the diabetes, is still there in the background.
Yeah.
So a little time goes by and in the background, the diabetes was still progressing. Some 6 years later, I'm now at a doctor's office getting blood drawn again. And now my A1C is 14 and my fasting blood sugar was 746. And so I got a call from the doctor saying, you need to come in immediately. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get you on the phone. She said, I'm not sure how you're not in the hospital right now. So I went in, and fortunately this time my PCP has a husband who has type 1. And I went in and she said, you have diabetes. And I said, oh yeah, it's that type 2 thing. I just need to stop eating carbs and it'll go away. And she said, maybe, but I really don't think so. We're going to do some quick stat tests and we'll know by the end of the day. Meanwhile, I'm going to give you some insulin to bring your blood sugar down. And by the end of the day, she called me back in and she said, there are 5 antibodies that we tested for that can be present in type 1 and type 1 diabetes. You tested positive for 4 out of the 5. She said, you're about as type 1 as they get. And
Wow.
now I test positive for all 5. And so she said, here's long acting and short acting insulin, and you're going to take these for the rest of your life. And that was a traumatic day because she said, you're going to have to inject yourself. I was 25 at the time. And that day, I've never had a fear of needles. I had, like I said, a lot of medical past. So I've had a lot of needles. But something about taking that tiny, tiny, tiny little pen needle and sticking it in my own body, I couldn't do it. And I just sat there and I cried, just tears rolling down my face because I couldn't inflict that on myself. I could let somebody else do it, but I couldn't do it to myself. And I had the best doctor because she knew me so well. As I sat there and held it to my belly and I couldn't do it, she just smacked my hand and popped the needle into my belly. So I would see that it didn't actually hurt at all.
Yeah.
And she was like, see, you can do it. And I was like, thank you, because I was so scared that if I couldn't do this, I was going to die, was what my brain was telling me. And so I took my first shots at the doctor's office, and I was there probably a half an hour, and she explained to me my doses and carb counting and carb ratios. And she, fortunately, she knew me, and she knew sort of my academic history, that I kind of had a good enough head to be able to teach myself some stuff. And she told me, you're never going to learn what you need to learn from your doctors. You're going to have to educate yourself. And she wrote on her little script pad the name of 3 books. She was like, you're going to want to go read these books. And one of them is Think Like a Pancreas by a guy named Gary Shiner, who is now my boss. And I read that book till several editions covers fell off. And I thought, well, if I have to learn all this, there are a lot of people out there that aren't as good at learning as I am. So I'm going to go teach some people. But I remember I had the clearest memory. I was wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans and pink sneakers. And I was driving a brown Chevy Blazer because I remember standing in the parking lot, staring at my truck, holding this these insulin pens in my hand, thinking I came in here one person, and now the whole rest of my life revolves around these things.
Mm.
And I'm
Wow.
driving home now to my new husband, a completely different person.
Yeah.
And I thought, you have to make a choice right now. Who gets in that truck?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought at that point, I made two decisions. And those decisions were diabetes was not going to take a single day of my life. It wasn't going to take the last one, and it wasn't going to take the one I was standing in then. It wasn't going to take a day.
Mm-hmm.
It also was not going to make me say, I can't. I had never said I can't because of being half blind. I had never said I can't because I couldn't walk as a kid. I had never said I can't because of leukemia or asthma or half a dozen other things at that point. I was not going to say I can't because diabetes. So I was going to be whatever I wanted to be, whether it was an actor or a mom or a nurse or an astronaut. I was going to be it and do it.
Yeah.
And so I put those pens in my back pocket and I climbed in the truck and I never looked back. It was bumpy. It was a lot of emotions
Right.
because we deal with the cycle of grieving.
Yep.
You know, there's anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And it is a cycle because I'm 16 years in, and there are days the glucometer still goes flying
Mm-hmm.
because it's not fair that I should have to deal with it. There
Right.
are days that I still sit down and have a really good cry because I spend $12,000 a year on diabetes instead
Right.
of taking my kid to Disney World, and that hurts.
Right.
There's times I bargain. You know, I keep my blood sugars really tight and right so that I can go have absolutely shenanigans at a holiday party. Does it
Right.
make any sense? Absolutely not, but it's part of the grieving process.
Right.
But more and more, it's acceptance and it's celebrating. My
Yeah.
family is so much healthier because I have diabetes.
Right.
I have multiple family members. I have a history of family members, in especially my dad's side of the family, do not live past 70.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't. I don't know anyone in my family who lives past 70. Most are lucky to make it to 60, 65.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of just silent killers like heart disease.
Right.
And when I look back, I can see symptoms of diabetes everywhere.
Really.
Absolutely everywhere. And I now have relatives who are in the 70s because for the past 16 years, I've been pointing out diabetes right, left, and center.
Wow.
So my family's whole health trajectory has changed because I got a diagnosis. I'm a way healthier person because I have diabetes. So I'm actually weirdly thankful. A lot of people get mad at me about that. I get so much flame online because people are like, you know, there's nothing to be happy about this disease. It's a horrible tragedy. It is. And I hope we cure this thing and kick its butt.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I am healthier and way better at third grade math than I would otherwise be. There are a lot of people out there getting exercise, redefining who they are, changing family habits,
Yeah.
communicating with their doctors, getting screened for diseases that have wiped out and decimated their families, their entire cultures,
Right.
because of diabetes awareness.
Wow.
So I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I mean, one thing I wanted to say was that, like, it's amazing that you had a mother who, like, set you up to think about, you know, different limitations the way that you do. So then by the time that you encountered, you know, your diabetes diagnosis, you know, you were set up to handle it better. And then also it's incredibly beautiful that your diagnosis has not only led to your whole family becoming healthier, but also the impact that you've had on so many lives of other people with diabetes that you
And
wouldn't have.
and it's crazy. Like I get so much fulfillment. Like I went to nursing school specifically to be a diabetes educator,
Hmm.
and I have never known anything in my life that I am as good at as being a nurse. Like it really is like what I was born to do.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't gotten that diagnosis, I'd have never gone to nursing school. My
Wow.
family is full of nurses, and my whole life people have said, "You should be a nurse, you should be a nurse." And I'm like, "No way. Those people are crazy. They're nuts. I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole." And then I got type 1 diabetes, and I was like, "Well, I want to be a diabetes educator, and I don't want to be a pharmacist or a doctor or a social worker. So I guess I'm going to be a nurse." Being an
There
exercise
you go.
physiologist seemed really hypocritical. So I don't like to. A nutritionist was, yeah, no, that wasn't happening either. I couldn't go tell people to eat more salads because I don't want to. So nurse it was, but I love being a nurse. It's like what I was put in the world to do, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't have found that without diabetes. I get to help people all day, every day, and yeah, I wouldn't have known any of that if it hadn't been for this weird 1% of the planet disease that I got.
Right.
Um, type 2, on the other hand, touches more than 50% of the US population. I
Right.
automatically have a connection and a bridge with 50% of people.
Right.
That is such a gift, such a
Yeah.
rarity that I would say it's like, it reminds me of like my family has a lot of military history. Um, the eyes and feet, and the Marine Corps wouldn't let me in. But but the men in my family always loved going to the VFW, and I never understood why until
Yeah.
diabetes.
Mm.
And you see somebody with their Libre, or you with a finger stick or something like that, and there's like an automatic camaraderie and
Yeah.
an automatic identity of brother and sisterhood, because we just we've been through the same boot camp.
Right.
We all know why an endocrinologist is both friend and foe. We just there are jokes that we just get.
Yeah.
We both know like carbs and like the drama that brings up, and so that's such a gift to
Yeah.
have that automatic connection with so many people from so many different walks of life,
Right.
and to just have that handed to us is really, really cool.
Yeah,
Um, and
absolutely.
I
Yeah, I
appreciate
mean, you're making me think. I read years ago Trevor Noah's book about his life in South Africa in his childhood,
Yeah,
and he talked about something that stuck with me was how the fact that he was like multilingual
yeah,
um, enabled him to connect with people in different areas like so much easier and instantly than if he, couldn't speak the language. And so that's making me think of like diabetes being like its own language and just having that instant connection with someone. Yeah,
yeah.
that's so
And
powerful.
it's so funny that you say multilingual, because like I speak beep. I've been in airports, and like you'll hear like the tweedle tweet, and like you look up, like that's a Dexcom, like
Yeah.
what's it? And like I have been in airports and someone go like Dexcom, and like I turn around and I'm like, hey, yeah, and they don't speak English,
Oh my
but
gosh.
Dexcom, like,
Yeah.
like,
Aw.
and it's like, you speak diabetes. I
Yeah.
don't. I only speak diabetes in English, but like,
No, it should be
it's
recognized as an official language. It really should.
oh yeah, we can't even get the words we use in the United States all together.
Right. Wow. So I'd love to ask about how, I mean, you've definitely touched upon this, and you made me think about how you know, you can either live life just with things happening, like just living life with the perspective of things happen to me, or like I make things happen. And I feel like you, through like having diabetes, you're kind of like pushed into that, like making things happen for yourself, and like also taking the responsibility for like your nutrition and having to be your own pancreas, and just the impact that that has, like in, like you said, your family's health and everything. Like, you know, so people can think of someone with diabetes as having like, oh, like you must be like less healthy because you have diabetes, but you know, you're probably taking care of yourself a lot better than most are without diabetes.
Yeah, very true.
Right.
That's my mom will every now and again, like I buffed up my elbow pretty good the other day. Oh, look, you can't even see it. It's healing so
No,
well. Oh,
I
there we go.
can't see it.
Yeah, right?
Oh,
Like I
okay. I
bashed
can
up my
see it a
elbow
little.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And my mom was like, oh, what happened? I was like, yeah, I buffed up my elbow. I was like, it's a little slow in healing, but it's coming along. And my mom was like, well, you know, the diabetes. And I was like, ho, 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 ho. Mm-mm. So my A1C is probably the best in the room right now because I'm
Right.
actually paying attention to mine.
Yes.
I actually think about what's happening and what I'm putting in
Right.
my body. You guys are just hoping for the best.
Right.
You have no idea what's going on. I said, it's a little slow in healing because it was like a quarter of an inch deep.
Right.
And I'm pushing 45. Things slow down a little. Like
Right.
I'm not the 22 that used to heal overnight.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, let's get real. Like I
Right.
said, if we're gonna have discussions about health, let's have it over, you know, weight and whether or not I get enough sleep, things that are actually relevant, not my
Right.
blood sugar.
Yes.
And that's very true. There are these stereotypes of, you know, we all see the little Debbie shirts with the little diabetes. You
Yep.
know, I always say, I don't have diabetes because because I'm overweight. Diabetes because I lost the genetic lottery. I'm
Mm.
overweight because I enjoy food and I don't enjoy running. Like, actually, I'm overweight because I also have a gastric insufficiency and a hypoactive thyroid, and yeah, so many reasons. It's a very complex metabolic picture,
Yeah.
but yeah, but there's this thing of like, well, people don't take care of themselves, they don't exercise enough, they're very sedentary. That can lead to a lot of stigma, a lot
Mm.
of shame, that no one has ever improved their life out of stigma, shame, fear. These may at best lead to a temporary change in behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can all crash diet, we can all white knuckle it and change things for a short period of time out of a sense of guilt, shame, fear.
Mm-hmm.
But empowerment leads to change in one's self identity, how one
Mm-hmm.
sees oneself in the world.
Right.
And that leads to behavioral and lifestyle change from within
Right.
that can be permanent because that's transfiguring. And that
Yeah.
makes me literally a new person, a new being in the space. And that lets me lead a new kind of life.
Right.
And there's no limit, there's no time limit on that. There's no like I have a bad day and I like throw the baby out with the bathwater on my identity.
Right.
That's who I am. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of that sort of thinking that is really stinking thinking.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they're healthy. I mean, we all know this. There used to be an idea of being like, they called it like skinny fat, that
Mm.
people looked good, like they looked very
Oh,
svelte.
yeah,
They
but
were
they're
actually
so
quite
unhealthy.
unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all know people that are like 140 pounds soaking wet, like 6% body fat, but they live on Diet Coke and Cheetos.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You cannot
Like,
judge someone's health by the way that they look.
yeah, and or by the way that they do anything, because we're all
Right.
very different metabolic creatures.
Right.
What keeps one person running will kill another person. We
Right.
have to realize that we are highly individualized,
Mm-hmm.
And we have to know what is going to keep us healthiest as individuals. But one of the greatest things about diabetes is that it keeps us watching.
Yeah.
It keeps us looking at our entire world, because there is nothing in my life that doesn't impact my blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing in my life that is not impacted by my blood sugar.
Right.
So I am constantly going, okay, how's my sleep? How's my stress? How's my mental health? How's my diet? How's my physical activity? How's my body? How do I have an infection going on? How are my relationships? How's my work? How's my financial picture? I am having to kind of keep tabs on my whole self.
Right.
Because if any of that holistic self gets out of whack, blood sugars.
Right.
And then I'm having to watch my blood sugars, because if my blood sugars get too far out of whack, something in that holistic picture is not going to be able to be maintained properly,
Mm-hmm.
or it's going to take way too much energy to do it. So it really enforces and requires a very holistic and very balanced way of being, not
Right.
just have a super controlled diet, have a super controlled way of living, have a super controlled. That's, like I said, in a short term, that might get you to a goal short term, but it really, in the long term, it takes a balanced person and a very holistic way of living to be a healthy person with diabetes.
Right.
Far be it for me to wish the other 90% of the planet, but I think if everybody lived with a CGM, and that's why, we see now in the fitness industry,
Right.
we see people who don't have diabetes throwing on CGMs, because people are going,
Right.
oh, if I watch my blood sugar, it'll actually help me work out better, lose weight better, sleep better, be
Right.
better at my job, because it's a really good indicator for a lot of other stuff.
Right. Yeah, I have
So
seen that.
yeah, I think we're going to see more as we learn more and we can gauge more about our bodies. We're going to see more of this sort of physical monitoring for more holistic living in
Right.
an odd kind of way. I think we're
Yeah.
kind of we might be the key to the new holistic living
Yeah.
sort of revolution, even though we've kind of been the key to the keto diet revolution thus far.
Right. Wow, that's such a way of looking at it. Like, yeah, I'm sure that just people's experience living with diabetes has just really impacted so much about, like, health advancements and everything in general. Um,
And we're really seeing, I think, people with diabetes demanding to be seen and demanding that our experience be recognized scientifically and through medical research is also really forcing eyes open,
mm,
in terms of the reality of a lot of medical phenomenon. Especially in women's health. We've, as women with diabetes, we have known that the impacts of women's menstrual cycles are huge, huge impactors on blood sugars. The impacts of menopause and perimenopause are massive, massive impactors on blood sugars. And we've shouted, quantify it, give us the data,
mhm.
make our clinicians see it, make them know it, make them recognize it, so that they're not blowing us off. And we're getting the data, and it's forcing medical science to go, oh, maybe perimenopause is a quantifiable time in a woman's life that can
Mm,
actually be marked with a beginning and a middle and different stages and an end. And maybe PMS is an actual quantifiable, medically diagnosable,
right.
treatable time, not just a women's sort of hysterical
Right. That's
bundle
what I was
of
gonna
sort of
say.
symptoms that they
Hysterical.
complain of. It's really wrapping science around what has up till now just been sort of an experience.
Right.
And a lot of it's because people with diabetes crying like, hey, no, this is a thing, put science around it.
Right.
And a lot of healthcare reform happening, especially in terms of capping prices and reducing FDA approvals of frivolous meds that don't actually do anything is coming about because people in the diabetes space are going, what about us?
Right.
What about our meds that are astronomically priced? What about our meds that we can't get approved because they're backlogged behind so many ridiculous frivolous meds?
Right.
So there've been a lot of really amazing benefits to the world coming through because my peoples.
Yes. I mean, I think this is a good segue into a question I wanted to ask you about self-advocacy and strategies for advocating for yourself in healthcare settings.
My number one that I tell all patients is advocate when you don't have the situation happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, a good one is people with diabetes often need more than one round of antibiotics to fix a
Mm-hmm.
problem. For example, a UTI, very common infection for people with diabetes because we're urinating out excess sugar. And so if we have an infection of the urinary tract, we're kind of feeding the enemy troops. Likewise, yeast infections, we're feeding the
Right.
enemy glucose, right?
Yeah.
So it'll often take more than one round of treatment. Have the discussion with your provider that it's going to take more than one round of treatment before you have the problem. Because if you're saying it while you have the problem, what your doctor hears is you just want more pills because you don't feel good and you want to make sure that you really get it, right? But our doctors are very conservative with treating with antibiotics right now.
Yeah.
So if you have that conversation when you're not actually sick, your doctor is hearing that you are sharing information. It also gives you the opportunity to say, really, I have never heard that. You have the opportunity to say, yeah, here's where I've seen it. Here's an article I read. Here's the email address for a really good diabetes educator that I know of that can share the information with you. And that way there's time before you have the issues. Backing it up with information, we are very often educating our clinicians. If when we're looking at the worlds of like type 2 diabetes, we're often managed by our PCP. Your PCP needs to manage everything from childhood illnesses like measles to athlete's foot to COPD to early stages of pregnancy to depression. I mean, they are the ultimate jack of all trades. Expecting them to keep up on advanced diabetes therapy, forget about it. Diabetes is all I do, and I bust my butt to keep up on everything because there's so much happening. But even an endocrinologist, I mean, diabetes makes up a little more than half of their practice. Type 1 diabetes still only makes up about 5% of the average endocrine practice. So expecting them to keep up on the cutting edge of what's going on or obscure off-label uses of, it's not going to happen. You might be dealing with a doc that came out of med school 30 years ago, and their education comes from whatever pharma rep comes into the office with lunch. And can steal 20 minutes of their time. So we're often the ones educating. So when you come in with a great article that you read, come in with the web page of a podcast that you listen to, come in with the email of a really smart educator that you met at a speaking event who's willing to talk to your doc. That way your doc has a team that they're working with, not just themselves and your say so because you thought it was a good idea. Like it's
I mean,
in the Wild West out there all by themselves.
Right. On that note of like building a team, like where could someone start when, it comes to, because I mean, I'm definitely getting the message of like taking ownership of, your own experience with diabetes and not expecting your PCP or your endocrinologist to just like have all the answers for you. But how can you go about like establishing a team of support, like, with integrated diabetes services or, et cetera, so you don't, because it does feel like a big undertaking to feel like, okay, I've got to do all this research and know everything about.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not for everybody. I mean, I'm a natural born academic, so
Yeah.
I'll wade through scholarly articles and, some people are like, "Ooh, let me listen to every episode of every podcast known to man."
Right.
I also say, please don't, because there are a million opinions on everything, and very often those opinions will directly conflict, and now you don't know what direction to go in, and that can
Right.
be very anxiety producing.
Right.
Um, so, and it's also depends on resources. The bottom line is not everybody has time, money, and the benefit of living in a major metropolitan area.
Right.
There it really ranges all the way from, I mean, I'm with Integrated Diabetes Services. We're at integrateddiabetesservices.com, and we are a private diabetes education and consulting group. We're a group of diabetes educators who all live life with diabetes. And so we offer our services directly to people with diabetes to offer advanced diabetes education. So that's
Right.
kind of the far end is go find a private diabetes educator who will just educate you in exactly what you want to know. And
Right.
then that's what we do. We go out and we learn everything and then we share it with you.
Right.
Through to, if that's not your option and you're looking at, okay, I have to work with the clinicians available in my area that are approved, covered by my insurance. First is, I tell people the best doctors and educators aren't always the ones who know everything.
Mm.
Often they're the ones who know what they don't know and
Mhm.
are willing to collaborate with others.
Yeah.
So if your endo isn't the sharpest, but he's willing to talk to an endo 3 towns over who is, or your PCP is willing to work really closely with your endo and do some of your prescribing, or like your endo is really tight fisted and hard to talk to and hard to work with, but your PCP is really open minded and really interested in learning. Great. Your endo can do your prescribing, your PCP can do learning and working with you and thinking outside of the box, and the two of them can work together.
Right.
Fantastic. As long as you don't have one of them that's like, no, if you talk to anybody else about your diabetes, you're out. If
Mm.
you've got anybody that's that kind of hard line going to close you out as a patient, then remember you are paying them.
Right.
Your medical team works for you, not
Right.
the other way around. Anyone who's going to threaten to fire you from their practice needs to realize that they can't fire you because you
Yeah.
pay them. You can
Right.
fire them because
Right.
you're the one signing the check, right?
Mhm.
So it's like if I walk in tomorrow and I go, Gary, you're fired. He's going to be like, nice try, Alicia, but it's
Right.
my office. Like, that was
Yeah.
cute. Like, what do you think you're doing? So your endo, your doctor can't just fire you.
Right.
If they're going to threaten something like that, find another clinician. If they're the only game in town, telemedicine it, find an educator. Educators, one good educator is worth 15 doctors because
Mm.
they're going to get you the knowledge that you need. The doctor really just needs to write the prescription.
Right.
And there aren't that many prescriptions to write. Knowledge is power.
Right.
You can do a lot more with a little knowledge than you can with a whole bucket full of prescriptions.
Right.
Then community is huge. When I was diagnosed, there wasn't, you know, Facebook and social media and all of those things. It was like chat rooms. And
Right.
I would sit in diabetes chat rooms until the wee hours and talk to people. So find people who have the flat lines and the A1C. Find people who are living with diabetes the way you would like to live with it.
Mm.
Are they're the level of tense about it that you would like to be. They exercise the way that you would like to exercise, or they have fun the way that you would like to have fun, or they eat the way you would like to eat, or their family looks the way your family would like to look, or something like that.
Right.
And just kind of go, how'd you get there?
Yeah.
Who do you work with? Where do you get your info?
Right.
And then follow along with that. I mean, that's my doctor handed me 3 books. I read the books and then I went on a chat room and I went, how'd you get there? And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I use this pump. Oh, I went to that website. I read that
Right.
website. I went, oh, this website's connected to this thing. And then I follow, and it was just kind of breadcrumbs along the
Right.
way.
Right.
Um, and just kind of follow the breadcrumbs to what works for you. Just because it's the most popular website doesn't mean it's the best. Just
Right.
because it's the one that your next door neighbor uses doesn't mean it's going to be great for you.
Right.
And just kind of put together what works for you. Fortunately, now there is so much that it's actually the opposite problem. It's
Mm.
like I said, there's kind of too much. You can really go down the rabbit hole and just drown in too
Right.
much information. So just kind of slowly pull out what works for you. And when in doubt, start with the most reputable. Start with the .orgs. Start
Right.
with ADA, the American Diabetes Association. Oh my gosh, I just forgot what they're called now. Formerly JDRF,
Oh,
diabetes
breakthrough T1D.
breakthrough T1. I always want to call it bright something. Breakthrough T1D, which is the formerly Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. It's the largest diabetes research and sort of informational body in the States. In terms of online kind of by us, for us, there's Beyond Type 1 and Beyond Type 2. I love
Right.
Diatribe is a great one online for more sort of like up to the minute research tech kind of
Yeah.
stuff. They're all written by people with diabetes. And that's another great thing. Always look for stuff by us, for us.
Right.
Tends to be the best information. And in general, avoid the stuff by pharmaceuticals and their manufacturers because they're always trying to sell you stuff.
Mm.
And then
Fair.
go from there, so you're on the ADA website and there's an article written by somebody and you're like, hey, that sounds like I could have written that. That sounds like that rings with me. Where does that person write other stuff? And then you
Right.
find other journals, other magazines, other podcasts they've been on. Okay. And kind of branch out from there.
That's great. I mean, I absolutely love the point about like finding someone who's living a life the way that you would like to live and then just asking them like how did you get there? I know that there is such an active diabetes community on social media. There's a lot of different people living like different kinds of colorful lives. I mean, I've thought I there's a few people who popped into my head who like travel a lot and they talk
Yeah.
about how they make that work and so yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a great
If
point.
you can, whoever you are or want to be, there is somebody out there doing that with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
Like there's not like a certain mold or with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, with type 3C diabetes, type every kind of, because that's the world now. Like
Right.
nobody's like locked into a mold anymore. There are no lines, there are no boundaries, there's nothing holding anybody back.
Right.
Type 2 used to look like, and it still does, like the marketing. I hate type 2 marketing because it's still like overweight seniors playing
Mm,
pickleball. Like,
right.
come on, Ozempic, get a better commercial.
Right.
It's like when reality, type 2, 24 years old, not overweight, could care less about pickleball.
I
Type
mean,
1
pickleball is
diabetes
getting
used to
very
be like
popular.
14 years old, rail thin, white. Reality, type 1 diabetes, 47 years old, African American male, really into
Right.
punk rock. Like what?
Yeah,
Like
right.
it's everybody and anybody. So yeah, just find you, and you'll find other people like you, and
Right.
kind of just say, how'd you get there? But
Yeah.
don't ever just chase the flat line. Don't ever just chase the A1C and do it like they did it. Because what happens is I always say, don't compare someone else's highlight reel to your blooper reel,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
anybody can make it look good on
Yep.
social media. What you
Yep.
don't see is the absolute hellscape behind that flat line.
Right.
So that's why I say find somebody that's kind of living, that's kind of doing the life that you want to
Yeah.
do, and find out how they got there, because that's more important.
Yeah. Love that. Well, we have reached the end of our session today. I'm just quick looking through the chat. So we did have a question, but it might not be something that we can tackle today. But it's what diet sorry, what diet do you feel is best to manage your diabetes? But I think that might not be a cut and dry answer.
And I always say, really, the only diet is so individualized, it's crazy. The only diet we really have science on for the broad human population is generally the Mediterranean diet. I mean, the human body is made for whole grains, lean proteins, high fiber fruits and veggies, high in antioxidants, and lots of
Right.
water.
Yeah.
That's the human animal, and it doesn't
Right.
differ just because you want to watch your blood sugars. Be a
Right.
healthy human animal, and your blood sugars will follow suit.
All right.
So, all
I
things
like
in
that.
moderation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
Absolutely.
eat plastic.
I mean, can you avoid it these days? I don't know.
You can try. Trying to eat things closer to how they came from the ground
Yeah.
and less how they came from that big thing with the smokestack on it is
Yeah.
generally going to be healthier for the human animal.
True.
But
True.
that's I'm not a nutritionist, but yeah, it's very, very individualized,
Right.
because the diet that works for one person and makes them healthy and happy, it's going to make the other person so miserable. They
Yeah.
might have perfect blood sugar, but then they will want to cease to be. So
Yeah. Right. Is it worth it at that point? Yeah.
well, and then their stress hormones are going to be so high that they're going to have other health problems.
Right.
And some people, their cardiovascular health and their triglycerides are their primary concern. Other people, sodium content might be the primary concern, and somebody else, we really have to individualize diet. But generally, that Mediterranean diet, low in saturated fats, stick with your whole grains,
Yeah.
stick with those high in antioxidant fruits and high fiber veggies, dark leafy greens. You really can't go wrong as a human being.
Yeah. Just across
Water
the
and lots of
board.
fiber.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for joining me today, Alicia. It was such a pleasure. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
Again, feel free to reach out. If you go to our website, integrateddiabetesservices.com, to reach me specifically, hit the Abouts tab, meet our staff. You'll see this weirdo on there. You can drop me an email with any questions or to find out more about our practice, or just to say hey. Get connected. The diabetes community is huge. If you're not a people person, just get connected, just to know that you're not out there doing it as an army of one.
Right.
Connection. We are not built to do any of life solo, including this diabetes life. And life sure does look sweeter standing on top of the barriers instead of standing behind them, just pounding on them.
Right.
So dare to rise above. It's scary because you could fall, and that's scary, but man, the view. You can't beat it.
Yes. I love that. Thank you, Alicia.
Thanks so much, Kayla.
Yes, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you. I just have to give my little disclaimer again before we log
I love a
off
good
here.
disclaimer.
Yeah. Nothing stated today is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, but is instead for information purposes only. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about a medical condition or treatment before undertaking a new regimen, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking advice because of something we've said here today. So, all right. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for everyone who participated in the chat. And thank you again to Alicia. And we will be going live again next month to talk about family and back to school. So more information will be coming on that soon. But all right. Have a great day, everybody. And you, Alicia.
Yeah. Have a great summer, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.